So, welcome back to Engaging and Empowering School Libraries podcast. In our last episode, we spoke to Helen Rimmer about well-being and kindness, two qualities that are vital in every aspect of school life, but especially when things get tough. Today, we're taking that conversation a step further, exploring what happens when school library management goes wrong, what we can learn from it. Poor leadership, lack of understanding, and redundancy can all take a huge toll, both personally and professionally, but they can also spark reflection, resilience, and change. I'm joined by two guests who've had very different experiences this evening, Lara Price and Rachel Huskisson. Together, we'll be talking openly about what happened, what helped, and how we can build stronger, kinder, and more effective school library cultures for the future. So let's get started. Welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me tonight. Can we start with a bit of an introduction from you both? What are you currently doing? So can I jump and start with Lara, please?
Hi, Elizabeth, and thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be on your podcast, and I will add, this is my first podcast ever, so very exciting.
Glad to be your first.
So I am in a really exciting moment of my life and change. So I'm 56, and I have been employed my entire working life. And I have never not been physically in a building, in a school or a public library, always employed. And so this point in my life, after redundancy last year, is rather than fall apart, I actually look at it as one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And part of that is down to health. I got hit with quite severe mobility issues in the past year, and I've had to rethink everything. And so that's why I started to look at what was available online. And I have been exploring the online education world. I have been exploring the online world of workshopping, of tutoring, of all the different sort of online schools, all the different experience you can have from my own personal 30-40 years of being a librarian, being a boarding house mistress, and being a classics teacher. What was out there? What could I bring to an online environment? It's been exciting. I've designed and built a website. I've designed workshops, which I now have an agency interested. So I'm looking to launch workshopping on critical thinking and brainstorming for corporate, for businesses, in January. I've got a very small online school where I'm going to be cover teaching as well, which we're in the process of sort of doing references and all the safeguarding at the moment. So I would say a year on, it's very exciting and it's very different, but I just went with it.
Hey, wow. So it sounds like it's an amazing leap forward, which is fantastic that you're there where you are. Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much, Lara. And Rachel, what are you currently doing?
So I am the library manager at a quite large FE college in the Midlands, and I've been in that job for about 14, 15 months. We've got 4 sites and I have managed 10 members of staff.
Okay.
So
So a bit of a transition as well for you?
yeah.
So how many years as a school librarian were you?
So my background is probably about 10 years in school libraries up until that 14 months ago when I made that transition whilst studying for a distance learning master's degree at Sheffield in library management. So it's been pretty full on, but yeah, it's all part of the journey, which you're probably going to hear about as well.
Exactly. So what's really exciting for me is that both of you have had huge things happen within work, and actually there is a positive outcome. So I hope that that's where our podcast is going to end up full of joy and how wonderful this new transition is. But we do need to go back to um, what your roles were when you began to have problems and how management decisions affected your school library at the time. I'm going to start with Rachel, if that's all right. Can I bring you back in?
Yeah. So I had two roles within school libraries. My first role was as a library assistant in a large comprehensive school. It started off very well, a really nice little team. There was the library manager, myself, and my job share, and we all got on really well and had a great time working together for about 3 years. And gradually, over those 3 years, things started to decline a little bit. The budget was getting slashed, things like that. The library space was being squeezed and a lot more pressure being put on what it was used for. And I think the library manager just could see where it was going, and she was approaching retirement, so just decided to retire early, leaving myself and the other assistant kind of there to see what would happen. And she was really concerned for us, but she's like, I've got to go. The result was they didn't replace. So we were in the middle of a merger with another school, sort of multi-academy trust. So it sort of fell between, I think the school was waiting for the merger to happen before they wanted to make any decisions around replacing the manager, but no communication. So cutting a long story short there, both me and the other assistant handed our notice in at the same time, 2 weeks before COVID hit. And so suddenly I didn't have a job to go to. I was just like, I need to just get away from this. So over lockdown, I explored other options and moved into another school. Thankfully, a job came up, and it was a promotion for me. It was running a small library in an independent school. So very different environment and different, again, the first couple of years were really good, and then things became not so good, and it's different problems. But yeah, it was I don't know how much to go into. I'll leave it there for now, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting that you say at the beginning it's good, and I think in most new jobs you don't know, you're beginning to settle in and work out. It is all exciting, isn't it? But it's that presumably it's when you begin to push, begin to want to do a bit more, or um, that's probably when the problems start, where your idea of what it is that you want to do and their idea, their being management, are at loggerheads. Um, was that your experience, Laura?
Yeah, so I'm slightly different. I've had 25 years working in schools, mostly, if not hired as a school, most of the start of it was a school librarian. Then I became a house mistress, but normally had some input in the school library, though not necessarily as running it. I've designed them, I've built them, I've done all sorts with them. And I even went up to head of boarding stage within my house mistressing side. So I sort of moved out of libraries, and then my health took a big dive, and I had to come out of boarding. And I also, due to a management clash in my school before this, I felt I needed to leave that school where I was a head of boarding. And I think I just got dented, really, is the honest thing. I'd had major life-threatening surgery, and although everything was so successful, the management style was very harsh, and it didn't suit my personality. So I left and I stepped right back. And then in my last school, I actually ended up, I think, moving away. I came out of boarding completely, and then I moved back into library. And I also came out of teaching. So I became their full-time librarian, but I was in a very small school that had not had, what I would think of as modern school librarian skill sets. So they were almost 50 years behind. So they were used to a librarian who might sit and they thought a librarian just kind of shelved a few books and helped girls find a story to read. And they didn't understand all the other things a librarian could offer. But in their timetabling, there was no lesson times in there, and I was pushing for that. I mean, I got put on the academic panel. I got my line manager as the deputy head. Luckily, my experience meant I knew what I needed to do.
Yeah.
But as opposed to 25 or 20 years earlier, my energy was not there, and I really feel school librarianship is a battleground. And you have to have the energy and the health to fight that. And sometimes we're not in that position. I had the knowledge, I had the skills. I did not have the energy and the fight that you really need to take it. So despite me there was also a big change there was a new head, there was a new deputy head, there was a new, the whole structure was changing. There was COVID, Brexit, all sorts of financial crunches on small schools. So I think I was still incredibly shocked when I was called in for a meeting, which I thought was to discuss my hours for the following year, and was actually them making me redundant.
So you didn't see that coming at all then?
Because I was on a really low salary, because I agreed to go term time only, so I was only paid term time only, and I figured I was doing an awful lot of other things. I was running the student council. I was when children were sent out of classes, they were coming to the library. I was trying to do outreach with departments who loved what I did, and they were going forward saying I was involved in the staff teaching and learning, sort of developing CPD for staff. So I was doing everything. I ran a staff book club. I was doing everything you should do. I just didn't have any direct teaching, but then teachers were letting me come into their classes and teach, as it were, study skills, research skills. I created a whole online library during COVID, which they'd never had. So I thought, I'm on a really low salary compared to everyone else in the school, and to be honest, it tiny amount of their budget, and I thought, I still feel I offered way more value for money. So yeah, it was a shock. It was a total out of the blue, and you don't get warning. I mean, there've been a couple of redundancies in the prep school, but there was mentioning that it might be happening, but I was I suppose they started with the prep school. I was in the first round for the secondary school, and there were half a dozen of us. And
what really surprises me, or sadly, maybe it doesn't surprise me, is the fact that your story is not unusual. Your story about, low salary, doing more than you're expected to do, jumping in, but then being hit with redundancy just seems like a blow too far. Rachel, does any of this, I know you didn't suffer from redundancy, but does any of this ring true to you?
Yeah, it sounds really similar to what I was doing in the role that I moved into. So I was presented with a job description which I hadn't seen prior to my interview. Anyway, and that was basically the person I replaced had retired. She'd been in the school for a really long time. It was her job description with some extra things added on the end. So I just got stuck in my lower paid, because I wasn't qualified, term time only contract, and was doing all those things, trying to, again, although I hadn't had the experience that Lara describes, I knew from what my boss previously had been doing. I knew what the role entailed, and I'd said to the school, you know, I'm not qualified, and they were like, well, if you need any training, let us know. So I thought, well, for me, that's quite good because I can hopefully get some more experience, because I knew that there were these gaps and I felt like a total imposter, but I also knew that I wanted the challenge to do it. So I did feel like there might be some opportunities for CPD that I'd not had in my previous school. But yeah, I just basically did everything in there, or tried to, but I didn't have the position that I needed to be able to really advocate for the role. So I wasn't head of department. I was within the support staff kind of system, and in that particular school there was quite a big hierarchy between support staff and teaching staff, and the teachers were lovely, but I just wasn't in the right places to be able to do what I needed or wanted to do, really.
Yeah.
And my
So,
line managers changed all the time. That was another issue.
so, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And and do you think it was your own lack of knowledge, or do you think that it was a lack of understanding of senior management, or both, possibly, that caused the problem? But is there something you would do differently going into a role like that now, having the knowledge that you've got?
I think now, yeah, definitely. I was a little bit naive.
Okay.
I, I, Lara mentioned about feeling dented going into her role, and I'd had my confidence knocked a lot in my previous role, been quite badly treated, sort of, and just made to feel not very valued. So I was going into this new one not having the confidence really to speak up for myself. And I know I should have asked for head of department in that interview process because of the position of it, and asked for the job description. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what, you know, it was COVID. It was a weird time. I just went in and had a chat and ended up with a job. And then, yeah. But I met the person who I was replacing on my first day. She went into, it was an inset day, and she was doing the refreshments. And she came up to me and she said, she was obviously, well, she was quite cheesed off with the way it had ended for her, and basically said, just get your qualifications. So I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, with hindsight, I think I would have asked for a lot more, you know, as far as the position.
Yeah. Lara, can I bring you back in?
Yes, so what I would say is I don't think that makes any difference. I was a head of department. I knew exactly what to ask for when I went into this job. I was a head of department. I wrote my own job description. I was on the in the academic group, heads of department. I was a head, I was a head of department. I was like, I worked, although I was support staff, I was also counted as teaching staff. So I was considered both. It helped teaching some classics because it meant I was working alongside, but it doesn't help if a school isn't going to see the value a librarian can bring. It doesn't matter, in a way, like they would have treated you the same if you were a head of department. So don't beat yourself up over that, because trust me, what I suspect, well, I know I was on SLT for a while, so I understand and I know what they're thinking. And a lot of time, you have to remember that schools are run not by managers, but they're run by teachers who have become heads of departments. Then they become deputy heads. Then they become head teachers. They don't necessarily have the management training. They're not from a management background, and in my personal experience, teachers are focused on what the teachers bring, and they feel that is the most important and their only consideration, and they don't necessarily see the whole picture of a school, the whole picture of the education of the child. And I have no idea how we respond to that, but I was initially shocked, but I was also reminded of a headmaster who I admire very much telling me way back in my early career, saying, you know, no job is ever safe for anybody in a school, because if financial crunches happen, or if decisions get made, or if for whatever reason a head teacher takes against you, you will be gone. It's, you know, they're small fiefdom schools, and it's a very different beast.
It's interesting though, isn't it, Lara, that actually if we're considering that, you know, that's quite a tough pill to swallow, I think, is the fact that even, you know, even if you're doing the best that you're ever going to be or ever do, I wonder if there is something that could be held onto, could be challenged, could be supported because we know this. Do you know? So we can't protect people's jobs, but we can protect how people are treated. We can possibly protect people in a way that we help management understand the value of a library. Do you think the leadership culture in the school shaped how the library was valued in your instance?
I think it shapes the value in every school library I've worked in. And I've worked in some very successful school libraries where I've been line managed by the head, because they're that important. And I've been managed by a head of English, a head of history in one school, because they were like, I'm like, that is so random. But it can make a difference, but what I would say is the future is where it's really exciting. With new curriculum changes, with the way that it's coming away from necessarily the old academia and more into the learning which a school librarian brings, the whole child, that's the exciting part. So I would say the history of school libraries, I don't think we've ever marketed ourselves, or we've never managed to get through. And in a way, what I would love is every teacher training course to have a school librarian module to say this is what they can do and bring to your teaching, to your classroom, to your children. On the Headmasters and Mistresses Conference, at the, you know, every single part. I know a lot of head teachers do a qualification as well. Part of that, there should be a module that is explaining exactly where they can take a school librarian and utilize it. So I'm all about, like, I feel that's where it needs to go. And what needs to happen is a gathering of pedagogy, because that's what teachers are obsessed with, and that's where, and I've screamed till I'm blue in my face where I've been told by so many teachers that, but we're qualified, and I'm like, and I'm qualified. I have a degree too. I'm qualified. I've done CPD training. So you get very much a kind of an old-fashioned overview in schools, in a lot of schools, where teachers are on the hierarchy, as Rachel was talking about, the hierarchy, and support staff aren't. But you're going, in the current world that we're moving into, I think that is going to change massively.
I hope so. I'm with you there, though, Laura. I really am. I think it is exciting times. But let's go back just one step. When it was hard, when it was really, really hard, what helped you? Let's go with Rachel. What helped you keep your confidence and professionalism intact during the times that were really challenging?
I think one thing I did really early on, because I knew what gaps I had in my skills and knowledge, I reached out very early on to kind of build up a network of support. So through the SLA, I got a mentor, and she advised me to join CILIP, which I did. And she said, you know, if you're wanting to take your career further, chartership's a route you could consider. And at first I was like, oh, that sounds quite hard. But I realized after I'd spent a year of like looking for stuff to learn, because you know, that was free usually, to kind of help me learn more about information literacy and things, I thought, well, I'm doing it anyway, I might as well do this chartership thing and make it actually official. So that really helped me see school libraries in the context of the wider sector, because you have to do that as part of the portfolio. And just learning more about libraries generally really opened my eyes. I think joining your membership, Elizabeth, that obviously was another big part of that, kind of building the network, filling in those gaps that I'd identified, and also having a couple of really good confidants within school and outside of school that I could just offload to, who I knew I could trust, and also a friend who worked in HR. Again, she really helped me, completely separate to the school, see it from senior leaders' point of view, from other people's point of view, to give me like a bigger picture, and help me put things into perspective a little bit, and realize that it wasn't necessarily personal what was happening. It was just, that's what happens because of this system we sit in, and these misunderstandings that Lara talked about, you know, that the fact that the teachers don't have management training. Where I am now, seeing it from that other side, it's so important when you're managing people to understand how to do that. And some of my line managers, I felt, didn't know how to do that, but
Yeah.
they were the things I think that helped me the most.
Yeah. And if you could go back, would you have done anything differently? Could the leadership have done anything differently to create a healthier library culture?
I don't think anything would have been different. I think I made the most out of the opportunities I had. I perhaps didn't advocate as much as I could have done. But again, talking about that energy, it's having the energy to fight for what you want or think is needed.
Yeah.
After you've had a couple of knockbacks from that, you think, I'm not getting anywhere with this. I remember, Elizabeth, you giving me some advice about just finding one person to work with, like one teacher who really understands or is like an ally. So I would do that and just focus on the things I could make an impact in. I really helped develop the library team. The student volunteers were amazing. And in a way that gave me like the management skills, like just I managed them as if they were my team, and you know, really invested in them, and that was very rewarding. So I found the positives within it, even when it was.
Yeah, it is hard when you're being knocked, isn't it? Lara, would you have done anything differently if you could go back?
I don't know that I could, because I was pushing about as hard. And I think the other thing to stress, as you learnt, Rachel, is that it's not personal. And although the shock of that first initial shock of the redundancy, the school was very, very good at trying to let me know that this was not a personal decision. This was very much a financial decision that they had to make, and they appreciated the work I was doing. Whether if I had managed to have those, you always go like, well, maybe if I had done the library lessons, maybe if they could see me as part of their curriculum, that would be different. But it was, I kind of made my own choices, and to be honest, looking back now, I'm so pleased at where I currently am that I have no regrets.
Yeah.
It was a journey. Life is a journey. All of my jobs were a journey,
Yeah.
you know, and there have been good and bad. I mean, the interesting thing is part of my boarding experiences, I did a qualification with the Boarding School Association in Roehampton, which was a 2-year qualification. 1 year was about pastoral care, but the second year was about managing staff. And it was because it was so important that when you run a boarding house, that you have staff. And I've always wondered why they didn't take that at Roehampton and put it into a teaching one, maybe. If you were looking to get promoted up to head of department status, maybe that was something that could be done, because it was a really good management course. They went through all different styles, and it was a university qualification. You had to write an essay, you had to do a report, you had to do research. It was a really, really interesting year that year, learning about it, which is really tough then every time I was faced with interesting management styles in the past. You kind of flag up and go, okay, so I've done the courses, this is exactly what they say not to do. Very hard. Very hard.
So, some people might be listening at this point where they are exhausted. They are at this point where they've tried everything. They're still trying. And you've both mentioned that you have to have that resilience, don't you, to keep on going. What practical advice would you give librarians who are struggling under poor management or feel that their jobs may be at risk currently? Let's go with Rachel first.
I think for me, there was a point where I just accepted that I couldn't do any more. Like I'd come to a point where I tried all the things that I thought were going to help me progress within the role. And it was a pretty low point where I realised that. And I thought, again, with a bit of hindsight, I think I just sort of outgrew it because there wasn't room to do what I wanted to do. But with that acceptance, it came at a weird time because some difficult things had happened. It was the end of term, everyone was very tired and frazzled, and I'd gone into work. I'd had to go in to do some extra days because I won't go into that, but anyway, I went in to do my extra days. And I got an email from CILIP saying, you've been awarded, congratulations, you've been awarded this, the CILIP 125 medal. And I thought, this is so weird because in my job, I feel like I'm totally not valued. And then I'm being valued as my profession, for my professional. It was just but it was that moment when I thought, okay, this is the time when I'm going to have to rethink and pivot what I'm doing. I'd done the chartership, that's right. I'd just got that in the April. This was in the July. And I'd loved doing the learning, and I thought maybe this is time to go and do the qualification that I'd said I didn't think I'd wanted to do or had the capacity to do or could afford to do. But I decided then that I'd look into it and find a way to make that work. So I started studying in that September, and I had another year within the school while I was studying, but my mind had shifted by then because I just thought this is my exit plan because there's no future for me here. And that was a really tough year because I knew I was going to stay where I was going to work at this shift, but things were getting gradually worse. Yeah, it was hard, but always knowing that I'd got this other route that I was taking. So, in answer to your question, which I've slightly got off, it's knowing when you. It's like that serenity prayer, isn't it? I can't remember how it goes. Something like having the wisdom to know. Do you know it?
I do know.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it was that, like, what can I change, what can't I, and that moment of wisdom. So yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is that in your journey, Rachel, you never stopped learning.
No.
And I think if we as librarians lose that capacity to learn forever, then it sort of brings you to a stop, doesn't it? Because actually, we're in a profession where we want our students to keep learning. We want them to be curious and be excited about what it is that they're doing. And actually, as adults and as librarians, that excitement of learning something and the joy of it is hugely important. And actually, if we can't do it as, we need to be demonstrating, we need to be showing what it looks like. And I can remember almost, not exactly the same, but similar. My love of learning suddenly got sparked. Like I wasn't very good at school, but actually once I decided that librarianship was for me, it wasn't easy. It's horrible. Trying to run a family, go to work, study when you got home, horrible. But the joy of getting an assignment in and getting it back and having done all right, was such a buzz that actually that's what we want to try and instill in our students. I want to bring Lara back in because your journey's been slightly different because by the sounds of things, you've constantly been learning. You didn't just find it, it was part of your journey all the time. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in lifelong learning, and to a certain extent, I think I went into school library. I mean, when I took my librarianship degree, I specialised in children's librarianship, and I started my career in public libraries as a children's librarian. But you work with everyone in public libraries, but you focus in on children's. And then I moved into school libraries in 1999. But for me, it was always about knowledge is power. Lifelong learning can make everybody equal. It doesn't matter about entitlements or money or anything, because there are public libraries that are open. It means every child and adult can learn and can make life better for themselves if they choose to. It was a huge frustration for me that in public libraries, people didn't realise that it was free.
Right, yeah.
And I used to go around visiting lots of schools and talking to school children and explaining how a library could help them in their school life through the 90s, and that it was free. They didn't have to pay anything, and they never knew that. And
I don't think they do.
And they don't. And again, we're back to marketing of librarians. Librarians, we adore learning, and yet we never learn the sense of how to actually share that with everybody else. So I think I always said, like, from the very beginning, I viewed myself as a signpost. That's how I always viewed myself, a signpost to help people get where they needed to be they children or adults. You're there to just help them on their journey of lifelong learning. But to do that, you have to be aware of everything that's going on around you in the world of education, in the world of politics, in the world of literature, in the world of art, in the world of, all these things. And you have to keep your brain moving. In technology, more than anything. As I said, I'm 56. I've gone from the very early stages of computerizing libraries, card catalogs to computers, right the way through to AI and ChatGPT. And it's like, okay, so you have to learn all of it all the time, and it changes all the time. Frustrating thing is it changes a tiny bit. I don't know if you've noticed with Office, every year there's a new thing comes out and it's slightly different, and sometimes it was the same as 4 years ago, and sometimes it's, and trying to remember how it works is a constant fun. But yeah.
So let's move on to the vision of the future. And I know that, Lara, at the beginning you said, and you've almost touched on it there a little bit, AI and the importance of that. And you've talked a lot about advocacy, but is there, you know, we have to have hope that the future will be brighter for school libraries. We just have to, because what's the point in us being here talking about it if there's no hope? We might as well just go home now. But how is it going to change, and what needs to be done? Let me bring Rachel in before I bring Lara back in.
Yeah, I think what Lara said earlier about the having it within the teacher training program, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? That I think would make a massive difference. I think the changes to curriculum that are being proposed, as again Lara mentioned around media literacy, that's really exciting. The problem, and this gets talked about a lot on your podcast, Elizabeth, I know, is around this the very complicated situation of some library staff are willing and able to do the media literacy, information literacy piece, some aren't. Teachers' understandings of it are different. It's very complex, isn't it? There's not like one understanding of what a librarian can do.
Yeah.
And that I don't know how that's going to change, but hopefully it will. The libraries in primary schools is another big positive. The reading, the year of reading next year, big government thing. So there are lots of things going on which I think libraries can really get behind. A lot around well-being and everything. We know everything we can do, but yeah, I am hopeful.
And what about you, Lara?
Yeah, I'm hopeful because I don't see how they're going to make an archaic education system designed in Victorian times really work for that much longer. There's a lot of money tied into making it keep the way it is with private exam companies, etc. But with AI now very much doing the work within workforces, they don't need grunts anymore. They don't need people running machinery like that. They need thinkers, and they need people who will think outside of a box, which means they're going to have to change learning. And now is the time, I think, and I really believe CILIP needs to really get in here and start advocating school libraries in a huge way, of exactly where we can. But as Rachel said, we need all the school librarians to get on board with this. And you're very right, we're a very individualistic group. And it has nothing to do with whether you're qualified or not. It's to do with confidence. And that's where what you did, Elizabeth, was amazing with running your group and networking, and that people could join you and learn more about what we can do. And I think the very fact that we're working in school libraries or wanting to work in school libraries means we have the mindset to a certain extent that you can then push people into doing all the literacy skills, doing the IT work, doing the things that need to be done. But don't forget, the reading is just as important. We have to cover two prongs.
Yeah, because the thing is, if they can't read, they can't do anything on AI or the media literacy or the research skills or anything. So yes.
It's the love of reading, and that's the thing. And the thing that the government, I was trying to push to my school, certainly, was that research shows that if you have a love of reading, and that is not an English lesson, it's not knowing how to read, it's actually enjoying what you're reading. And so it's not about forcing every child to read Dickens when they're 10. It's about going, okay, try a manga or try a graphic novel or try a comic book or see where you go. And then as that as they enjoy the fantasy land created within reading, you can then say, oh, but do you know this book is about dragons as well, or this book is about this is about car racing, which you love, or this book is, you know, footballers as Macbeth. It's like whatever, but you can lead the children on. And I think a lot of schools, when they saw that document from the government a couple of years ago, they went, oh, well, we've just given that to the English department to do. And I want to go, okay, so the children are sitting, and they're quite a lot. The ones you really want to catch are the ones that hate their English lessons, because otherwise they would already have the love of learning. And you want the teacher that they hate to get them love of learning. That you need neutral. You need somebody who is not involved in their exams and their academic life, and that they see in lessons, that they're not afraid to fail in front of, that they're not afraid to admit, you know, we as librarians were the pastoral carers of those children, you know, way before a teacher got involved. And that's our superpower.
Absolutely. So on a final note then, Lara, what message would you like to leave listeners, both for both librarians and school leaders, about why supporting effective school management matters?
I think what a school library can provide you with is a sword and a shield to any school. It provides you with the shield of protection, of supporting your teachers, of having their backs, of helping them through a large amount of work that they're trying. And normally their reason for not working as a librarian is we're too busy, when actually a librarian can step in and save them some and help them. And also we can be the sword in that we can take those children and we can help them fight and learn. You know, we can take them forward with information literacy and learning about bias and learning all these research and how important it is for the children to work with knowledge. So it's like, you've got this, you have the power to do this, and the library is so well resourced that the librarian can find the resources that you need outside of the lesson subject matter to help the overall education of the child. So your school then starts having successful children in the world of work. These are the children from your school that aren't getting fired because they can do critical thinking, because they can brainstorm and come up with ideas outside the box. They become important. They're not just doing what AI can do, they're providing something else. And then you can start promoting yourself, whether you're state, academy, or private, as a school where your children are not being made redundant, but they are successful in work life. And that, I think, is going to be huge coming up in the next few years.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And what about you, Rachel? How do you follow that?
No, I don't know if I can. Yeah, a lot of what you've just said, Lara, is what I've got written here. But I suppose what I would say maybe to the school leaders is just to really invest in your librarian, because I'm in a role now where I'm so fortunate that my line manager is supportive, is a big library advocate, and has given me opportunities to develop my skills. And that's amazing. And I get to do all these great things and push myself and challenge myself. And I'm now hopefully doing that with my staff. But it needs that person, it needs someone to provide those opportunities. And yeah, I would say that's what I'd love school leaders to do, like really invest in their librarians.
Perfect. Thank you. So we need those that are managing libraries to learn about what the school library is all about and how to give them the support effectively to make it all come together perfectly. Great way to finish. Thank you so much for your time this evening, both of you. As always, anything we've talked about will be in the show notes below. If you'd like to comment on anything you've heard today, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss out on future discussions. Thank you very much for listening.